My name's Linda, and I've been a teacher with Native Camp for over 2 years now, but I've been teaching English, a foreign language, for about 11 years. I'm based in North Yorkshire, in the north of England, but I'm originally from Scotland.
Hi, I'm Flynn, and I'm from London in England, and I live in the Philippines now, but currently I'm back in England for summer, and now I live in Brighton. I've been with Native Camp for also around 2 years, I think, maybe.
So my name is Ryan. I'm 28, and I was living in Thailand and teaching English in Thailand, and then before that I was living in Switzerland, and that's when I found Native Camp, and that was like 2000, so maybe 3 years with Native Camp, and now I'm just like, I live in Serbia, and I like work remotely from home, doing many different things, not just teaching, but like I play a lot of music, and I do like sound effects for games and apps and all of that boring stuff. So yeah, I actually go to England as well. So I'm from Cornwall, like right down the very bottom of England. So I go home in like 10 days, and then I have to leave for like 3 months, and then I come back. So yeah, I'm the same. I live in another country.
So in terms of common characteristics of students, I've noticed that the students that come to my classes are very motivated, very hardworking, and take regular lessons. Every day, and sometimes several lessons every day. They're super motivated to learn English, and are particularly interested in the British English, which is why they come to a British teacher's class. How do you find that, Ryan?
So I agree with you. I think a lot of the students that want to learn British English, I mean, normally they kind of struggle at first because of the accent, and their I guess American English is a lot more common. But the good thing about those kind of students is that they always ask questions, and that's what you should always do, like always want to know why. And with those kind of at that level, they always ask me like, oh, what does this mean, and what does that mean, and how, and they always kind of go the extra mile, which is what you want in your students, of course. It's amazing.
What about you? What about Flynn, though? Have you got any different experiences?
Most of the students that are really high level English, and it's very difficult to find any fault at all, maybe 1 or 2 in a whole lesson. They're always very, very consistent. They have lessons twice a day, 4 times, however many times, but there's always a certain amount of time.
I also notice that people who come to a native speakers class are often really shy. They apologize for their English, and they apologize for the level of their English. And then we have a conversation about politics and art and culture and literature. And so that shyness and sort of self-deprecating they get over that eventually, and it's part of our job as teachers, I think, to make them feel comfortable and make them realize. The way that I usually do that is by explaining I don't speak Japanese, I'm learning Japanese, and I find it very frustrating that I can't express myself easily in a foreign language. I speak French, but obviously Japanese is new to me, and I find that usually helps, because then we're on the same level. We're both language learners. How do you find it, Ryan?
I think like with some students, like because of my character, like how I am, I think I've seen a lot of interviews with teachers, and they're always like very together, very strict in some kind of manner. But I'm very much like I'm very ditzy, and like I move about a lot, and like if they make a mistake, I'm very much like whatever, like who cares, and make them feel comfortable, because it's just it's not like. I think sometimes with Japanese people, maybe with anybody who is learning another language, it feels like the end of the world. Like when they get something wrong, they're like, "Oh no!" But it doesn't matter. Yeah, who cares? I don't care. Like, and it's just me and the student, so who cares? What about you, Glenn?
I completely agree. I say it's actually good to make mistakes. So if, like what you said, Linda, that someone's embarrassed to make a mistake, I say it's a great thing, because then we can talk about it, you can improve. If you don't make mistakes, then you won't improve. So it's actually a good thing to make mistakes. So don't be embarrassed at all. Just everyone does it. All of us talking on this call probably make mistakes at some point. Everyone's human. So even in your native language, you make mistakes. So it's fine.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's making students feel comfortable. What you were saying, Ryan, about just being yourself, being relaxed. What I try to do is talk to them as if they were here in the room with me. The same way that I would talk to anybody else, the same way that I would talk to you, is trying to engage and communicate, and to put them at their ease, because they'll learn better if they're comfortable and relaxed. I know I do. If I'm uptight and tense, I forget things. If I'm relaxed, I retain the information better. So I think that's an important part of teaching, is to make students feel comfortable and relaxed and not foolish if they make mistakes. Should we move on to the next one now, or is it too soon? So in terms of the sort of habits and ideas about learning that might be changed, I think Japanese students particularly, but Asian students generally, are so determined to do well. They're sort of motivated from childhood to study, achieve. And so I think some students work too hard. I noticed that some students will take maybe 7 or 8 lessons a day, particularly during the pandemic, because they had nobody else to talk to. So it was nice to be able to sit and talk to one of your teachers. But I'm not sure in terms of learning how useful that is. I feel that if you study too much in a day, your brain gets tired. Your brain needs time to process its new information. And if you spend too long studying, I think you become overtired. So I think short, sharp bursts is better than really long, intense sessions. It's in whatever subject, but particularly when you're learning a foreign language. How do you feel, Flynn?
I completely agree. I've got some students that take sometimes 4 lessons in a row just with me. Yeah. And then they say, I've got 5 more. And I would say that's great, but it could be too much, because your brain gets fried. So if you're doing anything for too long, if you're staring at a screen for longer than 2 hours or talking for 2 hours, your brain drops and it's not quite at the level it could be. So I completely agree. And another point I had about things that could be changed was what we actually said before, was it's okay to make mistakes. That's something that could be changed to learn English. So same as what you said. And another one was translating. So I understand completely why someone would do it, but in this scenario, let's say Japanese to English, if as a Japanese speaker, it would be best to try, if you can, don't translate in your head from Japanese to English. Try just go directly to English, because if you translate from any language, it doesn't convert very well. Maybe the order's mixed up or something. So if you can, try to just think straight away in English instead of going Japanese. Okay, what's that in English? And then saying it. So
I've done that before. You can hear a student typing and they can't think of the word. You can hear them typing. You're Googling it. Stop.
Yeah.
Try and think of a different way to say it. Just try a different way. Don't worry about saying it that way. Find another way of saying it. And I think that's really important. What about you, Ryan?
I think you guys are saying about the positive kind of student that really want to get stuck in and learn and go. So those are the kind of students that will take loads of lessons and like that. But then there are also some students who, they take maybe 1 lesson and then they expect to be fluent in that 25-minute lesson, So it's another, it's good that people take loads of lessons, of course. I agree, it does have the brain, and you really should only, maybe 2 lessons is definitely enough. But then some students, they will take 1 lesson and then they don't really, go much further with it. They think, I'm trying to think of the word, they're very shy with how they, let's do an example. Wait, hang on. Can we just edit this out? This is I'm going to like we can edit all of this out. This is okay. So they'll take a lesson, and then for the rest of the week they won't take a lesson. And you always ask these students, oh, have you been doing anything to help with your English? And they always kind of say no. And like I think, one time I was kind of learning German, and I wasn't speaking German every day because I didn't want to do it. So it's kind of, you guys are speaking about these students that are really good, but I've had students that just don't really care. They kind of just have one lesson, and that's good enough for them. It's kind of just a way to have a conversation, like talk. That's kind of what I've been getting so far. I haven't had like 5 bookings in a row. Have you had 5 bookings in a row?
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh goodness me!
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yeah.
That is. Cool.
I've had a student who's studying for a particular exam or a presentation, and they want to work with a native speaker to make sure that they're on the right track. And so before an exam, particularly an IELTS exam, I'll get a student who'll come in and maybe do 4 or 5 lessons in a row before their test. Yeah. Wow, it's tiring for me as well as for them. It's too long, really.
Of course, yeah.
But talking about this, so what you mentioned, Ryan, I think we haven't spoken about children who are studying, and I have had a lot of children who are studying material from the textbook that's inappropriate for them. And their parents really should be looking at the content of the material, but also that are talking about relationships or alcohol consumption, or just things that you wouldn't talk to children about, and you asking them questions about things that like in the conversation section of the Daily News, for example, they don't know, they have no life experience. Cool. And so perhaps their parents need to be looking more closely at the content of the material. Yes, they can read the article. Yes, they can answer the comprehension questions, and they can understand what I'm saying, but they haven't got enough experience to participate in the conversation section. So the parents perhaps need to be looking at the content and how relevant it is to their child's learning needs. And there's also children who are studying English and they really don't want to.
Of course,
I've just had one. Just been talking to a student earlier on today, and he was playing with his cars. I think sometimes the parents think that you'll be able to engage with them easily, and it's as difficult remotely in their own bedrooms where they're distracted by other things as it is for a teacher in a classroom where there's a lot of kids. So I think parents who are encouraging their children to learn English, which is fabulous, and I have got some amazing kids whose English is unbelievable for their ages, but the material needs to be looked at closely before their kids sit for 25 minutes trying to think of why, after drinking a bottle of whiskey, they might not be able to walk in a straight line.
How about you? What do you think?
I agree. You can really tell when a kid does not want to be there, and it's just their parent pushing them. So it's on the parent for that one. That if you, as a teacher, you could be the best or the worst. It doesn't really matter. If the kid doesn't want to be there, then what can you do? But yeah, completely agree about the material as well. It has to be relatable, because otherwise it's really just words. I know that's all a language is, but there's no relation to it. You can't really understand it at all. So it has to be relatable to whoever it is or whatever age. So yeah, completely agree.
It's also like sometimes these really young students will choose free conversation, and they cannot speak. It's basically like you said, playing with the cars and just not really talking. So I don't really understand that as well. I think if the student is not able to properly speak, I think, even 5-minute discussion where you have loads of topics, I think it's just not right. I think they need to really have the basics before, maybe even a bit more, because, I like having big, in-depth conversations, like diving into people's lives and knowing about loads of these different experiences that they've had and making things very fun and cool and meaningful. And when there's a young student that cannot speak, no offense to anybody. Thank you for coming to my lessons, and thank you for
absolutely.
But there's you need to know your limits, And yeah, I think that's
and I think that's the key, is that we're not criticizing anyone for not being able to participate or not being able to communicate at that level. It's just a discussion that has to be had. I mean, I now play games. I play word games. I've now downloaded some interactive word games that I can play with the children, so that at least they're practicing their vocabulary skills, or we're playing word games where they need to know the spellings of things. And so we're not having a conversation as such, we're having a free lesson. And I've learned to do that over a period of months, when I've had a lot of kids will come for a free conversation class and their language skills are very good. But unless you know that child well and what they've been doing, it's very difficult to have a meaningful conversation, because by the time you've said, did you have a good day at school? What have you been learning? Who's your best friend? Do you like your teacher? And then, what activities do you do after school? That's one lesson gone. If they come back for another free conversation class, you think, oh God, what do we talk about this time? Which is why I started Hangman, I Spy, all the word ladders and things. And they like that. And I feel at least that I'm engaging and they're learning something. So, yeah.
It's different, but I think because some students as well, like especially 5-minute discussion, because that you have to choose basically 2 topics to talk about. You can do loads of, and there's like 100 topics. So of course those are really good, and you can go through them. But then it really depends on the level as well. I mean, there was oh God, I can't think of that. Like there's things like animals and
hobbies,
hobbies and movies. But then they get harder and harder, and then you just think, oh my God, they're so young, but do they know about these things?
Exactly.
So
I think one of them is orphanage or orphans, one of the 5-minute discussion topics.
Yeah.
And I have a student who's a kid, and they just pick a random number, and you get things like that. So like a 10-year-old kid picks orphans as a topic. How do you talk about that? So I agree.
How do you put it in a nice way? Like the parents, it's crazy. Of course,
I think this is where the parents need to be getting involved in the content of what their children are studying. It's all very well putting them in front of a native camp lesson and making sure that the communication signal works, but they should also be looking at helping their child to supervising what they're studying. Can we go on to the third topic? Yeah. Okay, so unique English expressions which Japanese students, I have to be honest, I mean, I get surprised, but I'm not offended that none of my students have ever used a phrase or a saying that I've been shocked or surprised at. Only in a good way, because that they've obviously picked it up from a movie or from a book or from listening to podcasts, or they've been listening to natural English and have picked up certain words. So somebody will say to me, oh, by the way, oh, very good, that's very that's a natural thing that we would say to one another. Oh, by the way, I just remembered. I like to hear that, because that shows that then they won't have picked that up necessarily in a lesson. They have heard this perhaps in a podcast or watching dramas or that sort of thing.
I agree. I kind of have the same thing. I don't really have problems with the phrases that people say. The main thing is kind of like the pronunciation of people. Like if we go into detail, if we talk about dropped syllables, for example, people this is just me saying, this is no drama. I don't want to offend anybody, but people will say things like basically like this, when in reality, in England, for example, we would say basically, and it's the same with words like chocolate, or like people would say chocolate. I find people struggle with those kind of things a lot more, like the pronunciation of words. So chocolate, several, like those kind of, that's my take on it. I think phrases, students are quite good with their phrases. I think I've never had to say, whoa, no, that don't say that, say this. I've never really had that expert, but I think pronunciation is one of the key this dropped syllables. They need to be presented in I think maybe there's a native camp lesson where they do that, of course, but that needs to be focused more. I think pronunciation is key.
The same. I've never had any phrase that I'm offended by. Sometimes casual ones, like a student would say, "Oh, I'm really pissed off today." So I'm never offended by it, but same thing that maybe they've picked it out from a movie or something, but it's actually in everyday English is really quite common. But I guess from a teacher and a student, you probably wouldn't promote using that.
Yeah,
but it's normal. And some other ones that not offended in any way. Things that I hear quite a lot is how to say. So I think the Japanese equivalent is nandero, but then maybe this translates to, in English they say, "Oh, how to say," but
how do you say that?
Exactly, yeah. So even asking how to say something, they just say how to say. That's a common one.